Okay, I think everyone that's going to join us has probably joined us by now, so we will start. As you know from the email that we sent out over the weekend, this session hopes to just share some really practical and kind of easy to use ideas for all of us as we kind of face this new teaching from home challenge that we all find ourselves in. Next slide, please, Rachel. And before I get onto that, I just wanted to say a huge thank you for three things, really. One, thank you for signing up. On a personal level, it's really, really nice to see when people sign up. At the weekend, I had this idea and I didn't know if it would be useful. And as the entries came in, I was kind of reassured more and more that perhaps this was the right thing to offer. So thank you, for coming this afternoon. More importantly, though, thank you for all of the hard work and effort everybody across the trust has put in today to prepare for the unusual situation that we all find ourselves in. I know that inset days have had to be planned. I know executive principals and principals have worked flat out over the weekend to get everything ready. And I know that everyone in school today or remotely in school today has been busy sort of working away. So thank you for that. And finally, thank you so much for embracing this new way of teaching that we find ourselves in, that we're having to do. As we kind of go through today, Rachel and Cheryl will share lots of sort of practical examples and ideas with you. But I know that the success that we provide our children over the coming weeks will be down to the hard work and commitment from all of our staff. So thank you for that, and thank you for bearing with the challenges you face, and all of the great things that you achieve will soon outweigh any of the difficulties that you had along the way. Next slide, please, Rachel. And the most important thing I wanted to say was that you're all great teachers, and you all know what great teaching and learning looks like. You know the children in your class. You know the curriculum that your children need to learn, and that is the most important. I've got the most important slide of the presentation, by the way, but this is the most important thing, to say that your teachers that know these children, you know the curriculum, you know teaching and learning so strongly, and please don't forget that. Yes, you might be at home, yes, you might be sat in front of a Chromebook with a child at home, but your knowledge of teaching and your children is really the key to the success of absolutely everything. So please don't forget that, and remember that's what's really important as we go through the next few days. Next slide, please, Rachel. And what I really wanted to do, just as part of my last slide before I pass over, was just to remind you what we know about teaching and learning generally. And I've kind of drawn on some research by the EEF. So for those of you that don't know, the EEF are the kind of main educational researchers. It's definitely in the UK and certainly well respected globally. And they've recently done some research around remote learning, and hopefully what's in front of you won't surprise you. Remote learning needs to be clear. We need to continue to stick to those learning objectives, success criteria, etc. And recognizing that actually, in order for learning to work, it needs to be purposeful. We need to have a real understanding of that before we teach our children. Remote learning needs to be consistent. So we need to make sure that we're continuing to use all of those resources, all of the vocabulary, all the terminology that we would have done if we were in the building. We need to model, and modelling is really, really important. I know Rachel and Cheryl have got quite a few ideas for different ways that you can do modelling. Yes, you won't have an interactive whiteboard at home, I guess, or a whiteboard at all, but actually there are so many different ways to model. We need to continue to provide the feedback. Our marking policy is exactly the same now as it's ever been. We haven't ever changed the expectations of marking in this situation. So we should be continuing to provide that feedback, that response, that next step, support to children in the ways that you would have done in your own individual schools previously. And finally, and I guess most importantly for me, remote learning needs to be engaging. Children come to these lessons because they want to see you. Yes, they're interested possibly in fractions or expanding noun phrases or fronted adverbials or any of that sort of stuff. And yes, that's really important, but it's not as important as you. It's not as important as having that connection with a teacher that they associate with trust, love, respect, wisdom, intelligence, all of these sort of things. That's what's really important. And so, yes, of course, focus on your learning and make sure that happens. But please don't, forget that you are the most important person. And even I say that you're more important than Google Meet. And all I've done today is sat on Google Meet. So, you are important in these children's lives, and please don't forget that. I'm going to stop there and just pass over to Rachel and Cheryl now, who will kind of follow up with some more practicalities. But just wanted to finish by saying, please do happily email me if there's any questions or if you've got any sort of technical problems or worries. We're here to support you, so please do just ask if you need it.
Perfect. So you'll see in the top right corner of your screen that there is a poll. Some of you may have done it already. If you haven't, just next to the usual chat feature within Google Meet, please do just share how you're feeling. I always like to start with something like this when you do a live lesson, because it's just a great talking point. And that's one of the most important things. And I'll come back to this sort of towards the end as well. And it's also worth saying that these slides are shared with you. So if you just go to the Q&A, you'll see that the link to these slides. So do feel free to either follow along, make a copy of them so you've got access to them. And, you know, there are some things that are sort of skipped just so that I sort of don't spend too long going through them. And you'll see that there's lots of slides that Cheryl and I will be going through. So as we mentioned, there are 10 tips that we will go through. It is important to remember that we recognise that some of you will be teaching, some of you will be supporting in Google Meet, so some of this may not be entirely relevant for you, but there's still hopefully going to be some really key takeaways that will be able to help you. So I think one of the sort of important things to remember, and I can't see all of your cameras right now, so some of you could be sort of head down on your laptop, sort of struggling to be on this Google Meet right now. It's important to remember that that experience is exactly the same for our children, so just to be mindful of that. So I'm going to go into preparing to start a Google Meet, which some of you may have already done today in your sort of busy time. And there are two ways that sort of we're focusing on in terms of starting that Google Meet. And that's either using that Google Classroom direct Meet link or setting up that Google Calendar. Now, it is important to remember that if you are using the Google Calendar view for setting up that Google Meet, that it is really important that whoever needs to have ownership or whoever needs to be able to mute anyone that suddenly starts talking or perhaps remove them from the call should be the other person. So for example, currently Graham is our meeting host and that's not something that we can change. So Graham set up this Meet link. So Graham is responsible for muting any of you who are continuing to talk or to boot you out of the Meet if needed. So it is important just to remember that if you are supporting on a Google Meet, I would always suggest that it's that person that's creating that Meet link. For Google Classroom, it's actually the first person that enters the waiting room, and I'll show you what that looks like now. So for those that don't know, what you can see on my screen now is the meeting wait room. So it's where you go prior to joining your Google Meet. So the first teacher that goes here will suddenly become that host of the meeting. So I'm just going to go in and I am going to turn my camera off, just a couple of things just to quickly show you. Obviously, you do have your background blur as well, so you can go through and customize your background before you join a call. It's always worth sort of setting up your expectations around that, and then you can go in and join that meeting. So you'll see here that obviously if I needed to add any people to the Google Meet, that I could go through and do that in here just simply by adding them, but they'll probably already have access to that. So a couple of things that I'm going to go into now specifically that are really helpful when you're using your Google Meet is your settings, and they're found in that traffic lights down the bottom right corner here. So when you tap onto those three dots, you can bring up your settings. Again, one of the common problems that happens is either if you're using, say, different headphones to your Chromebook, or perhaps your video. So if ever you're having internet problems, then actually changing that resolution on your video can be really helpful to be able to manage. that quality, so you can always bring it down to standard definition. It'll still work as normal, but again, can be quite helpful to refer to. Also, within those same settings that I just showed you, you've also got that ability to change the layout. Now, this is one of the great things about Google Meet now, is that you aren't limited, whereas before the first lockdown, you were capped at not being able to see your entire class. You can now drag this slider to be able to see all 49 of your class, and that will then auto-populate as well. Again, this is really helpful just to remind your class that they can do this, because sometimes what happens is it's set to spotlight, so they only see one person, or they can't see all of their friends in their class as well. A couple of things as well just to mention is obviously there's that keyboard shortcut when you hover over your controls to mute and turn your camera on and off. And you've also got that ability to turn on captions. Now, again, the closed captions does appear at the bottom of the screen, and this then does make it more accessible. Some learners do prefer to be able to read along whilst they're watching. Again, it's a user by user basis, so you'll have to turn it on yours. So again, you may decide to prompt your children to do that. Now, in terms of the teacher side, probably the biggest reason that a lot of you are here is in terms of being able to manage those Meet controls. And they're found just in that bottom left corner, so that blue shield. And when you tap onto that, you've got a couple of options. So the first one is your quick access. Now, when this is turned off, you can see that everyone who isn't invited is essentially will have to knock on the door. So you may hear that sort of doorbell. That's actually when they are joining, that they have to ask to join. So again, it can be helpful if you want to sort of stagger or let them all in one hit to be able to do that there. And you've also got that sharing settings. So again, you may decide to toggle that off, and so that when children do come in, you don't have to worry about them going through to share their screen. And again, one of the other common things, especially is to sort of be mindful of, is that chat messages. And again, we'll look at this a little bit later when we talk about expectations, but it may be that you decide to turn off the chat as soon as you start teaching. So you may give them 5 minutes at the start to sort of connect with each other and have a bit of a chat. And then as soon as you start teaching, you can turn that off and then turn it back on as and when you need it as well. So you've always got that option. One thing I will touch on really quickly is just that within Google Meet, it's actually much easier to be able to press the space bar to mute and unmute. And this is pushed out for all of your children to be able to access it as well. I'm just checking through before I go in. So one of the other things just to note is obviously when you go into the people section on the side here, this is where you have your controls to be able to mute and also to remove someone from the call. So one of the things that you'll see when someone joins that call is a little minus sign, and that's obviously how you can remove them from the call. Again, like when we're in the classroom, just be mindful of those sort of expectations around there. I also encourage you all to use the raise hand feature rather than actually asking them to raise their hand when they're in a Google Meet. It's a really effective way to be able to take them through if they do have any questions, to be able to quickly pick up on those as well. And I'm just checking if there's anything else. So the last two things I'm just going to say is just in terms of your settings again. So just to come down, you do have that ability to record the meeting. And again, we do ask that you do record all of your class meets with your class for safeguarding purposes, and also that you do have 2 members of staff on those calls as well. So when you do tap onto that recording, you'll see that it'll ask for consent. It will then toggle through. It does take a few seconds to come through, and then you will hear the sound once it's started. And once that call's finished, it will then be saved to your Google Drive to be able to access it as well. So I'm going to jump back to my presentation and I'll hand over to Cheryl.
Thank you, Rachel. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to sort of talk through with you a little bit about kind of how to share your screen with the students and to make sure that everybody's kind of okay with that, because I think that's the bit that from the conversations that I've had over the last sort of couple of days, I think that's what people are most sort of worried about, being able to kind of share their screen. So what I'm going to do is Rachel's just going to stop sharing her screen, and I'm just going to talk you through how I'm going to share my screen with you. So you can see we're in the Meet call right now. Nobody is presenting, so everybody should be able to see that when they move their mouse, at the bottom right hand side there is a button that says present now. Please don't press it because I'm going to do it, and only one person can do that at any one time. And then it gives you a number of options. You have presenting a tab, a window, or your entire screen. Now I'm going to present my entire screen just to show you kind of the next bit. But the tab option is really useful, especially if you only want them to see maybe just your slides and nothing else. A window is really good again because you might want them to you might have something else on another window, like your emails or whatever that you don't want them to see. Or you can just have the entire screen. And kind of the downside to sharing the entire screen is just to make sure that you've taken away, before you go into your meeting, you've taken off everything that you don't want the children to see. So that would mean you need to make sure you don't have your emails on and things like that as well. So I'm just going to share my screen with you now. And you can see here that what I want to do is I want to present this slideshow to you as the audience. But if I press present on my slideshow, you'll see that it completely takes control of my whole screen and I can't do anything else. I can't see anybody, I can't do anything. And that's a big problem when we want to be able to see and communicate with our class. So what we're going to do is we're not going to do that. And there is a little trick that you can do, and there are some, the instructions are in the slides when you do get to them. But if you look at the top of my screen here, you can see that I've got this docs.google.com/presentation. I think this is my biggest top tip. So I hope everybody's going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. And we didn't know about this. But you can see here at the end, it says there, edit. So it's got a / and then it says edit and a load of kind of gobbledygook. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take out everything that's that side of the edit / So we're just going to delete that out and we're going to type in the word preview. And then we're going to press enter. And you can see now that my PowerPoint is now in present mode, but I still have access to my tabs, which is really useful, because then if I'm now in the middle of if I've got my Meet, just going to put my Meet back on here as well. If I've got my Meet on one, what I can do now is I can split my screen so that I can have the Meet on one side and I can have my slides on the other. So I can see what's going on and the children will be able to see what's going on. So how do you split your screen? Good question. So again, while you're at the top here, if you just double click this bar here, just the remaining bar that you're not using, you just click it twice, you'll see that my screen has now moved completely to one side. And if I bring out my Meet tab and put it on one side of my computer, you can see now that I've got access. And again, I can drag it, I can just change it. I might want to make it a little bit smaller. So I'm not seeing all my students, but I can see some. And you can see now that I now have access to both. And I'm able to then look at my audience and present at the same time. And I think that's really important. We need to be able to see them. We might want to see them with their hands up and things. So we can do that. And we can go in and out of that if we wanted to as well. If we want to make the screen bigger again, we can do that. We just double click again and it'll open up the Meet again. And then we just double tap it to make it smaller again. So it's just really, really simple way of doing that. So that's how we kind of split screen and how to preview. Thank you, Layla. Thank you for the top tip, because that is my favourite tip. And that's it, meeting over. No, I'm joking. So that's kind of a massive slide tip. I suppose the other kind of things to think about, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a minute. get back to my slides. Sorry. Stop presenting. The other sort of things to think about then are things like using things like Jamboard as a way of being able to model to students. So if you haven't used Jamboard before, which I think most people probably have in one way or another now, Jamboard is excellent for kind of being able to model and get children to manipulate things, and you can model, you can get the pen tool and you can use that. I'll show you a couple of examples with that later as well. But again, with Jamboard, you won't need to do that present mode because you don't lose the control of the two tabs at the top. So again, you can do the same thing with Jamboard. You have the Jamboard open, you split the screen, and you've got the two options, but you don't need to do the preview present thing. Other things that you can do within Mmote are things like if you're nervous about the whole sharing your slides on and having a split screen, there is another option that you have. And I'm just going to show you, present my screen again. Sorry. It's a learning curve, sharing your screen, definitely. Here it is. Oh, I've gone all the way to the beginning of the slides, which isn't useful. So the other tip that I have for you really is that if you're worried about having it on your screen and not being able to present and have your class at the same time, what you can do is you can also download the Google Slides app. It only works on, I believe it only works on Android. But what's really good about Remote for Slides is that you can almost have your slides on your phone and it acts as a controller. So you can just you can advance the slides directly from your phone or your iPad or whatever it is that you've got, any sort of tablet device. And again, it's just another way. And also it uses the, if you wanted to put notes in the bottom, you can get all the notes on that as well. So that's another way of you put your slides on your phone. You have your Mmote open, you join. When you press present on your phone, it will ask you to present to a Mmote call. You type the Mmote code in, which is the bit that comes at the top, and then you're ready to go, and it sort of signs in as a separate person, which again is really, really good. So there's another option for you to do. We've gone through that. So I'm currently presenting to you not my entire screen anymore. I'm now just presenting the Chrome tab. I don't know if you can see what the difference is, but the difference is that you can't see my address bar at the top, and you don't have any access to the rest of my screen. So I could have other things on my screen, and the children wouldn't be able to see it. So that's what the Chrome tab is. There's loads of instructions here when we send this out. And the Chrome tab option is the only option that allows you to use the audio. So if you're playing children videos through during your lessons, make sure that you're only sharing a tab and not your screen, because otherwise it won't pick up on that. You can also open a whiteboard within Google Meet now, and that's a new feature that I haven't even tried yet. But what you can do is you can see on the 3 dots that Rachel talked about a minute ago, where you've got those options of, the layout and the recording. There's now a whiteboard thing. So if there was something that you just wanted the children to quickly work on together, you could do that directly in Meet now. So you can whack the whiteboard up. Children can put Post-it notes on and things. You've got all your ideas. Another really nice way to be able to do that. And you can also share within Google Meet Jamboards that you've already made as well. So if you've got other Jamboards, you can upload that too. And then what it does is it just pops it in the chat for the children to access, which is really useful. Just a couple of examples about how Jamboard can be used, just to kind of remind you. Again, like I said, I'll show you a little bit in a minute of like a model lesson that I'm going to be using live with my class, but it's a really good tool to be able to physically move things around, and it's great for lots of things, and being able to sort of laser where you want children to look and things as well. So definitely go for that. And I'm going to pass you now back to Rachel to go through breakout rooms.
Perfect. Thanks, Cheryl. So I'll take you through. Oh, has my presentation has even come through? Let's try again. Okay, so I'm just going to very quickly go through Google Meet breakout rooms, polls, and Q&As. So when you all joined, you will have seen the Q&A. I can see some of you are already on the presentation, which is fantastic. So you'll notice that little jigsaw piece that sort of appears in that top right corner, or the shapes, I should say. And then you'll see the different options. So you've got that option to, if you're a meeting host, so you won't see this right now, you'll just see that ability to go in. So this is a helpful way. Polls are a great way for doing a quick check-in. So do you understand? Does anyone have any questions? You could do a yes, no, you could do a numbers, you could do sort of letters. And you can give that option to either share them so that they can actually see the results of the poll. So maybe you're asking what their favourite food is, or favourite subject, what they'd like to do more of in your Google Meets. And you can use that to show everyone the results option. Now, when you go through to set up a question and start a poll, it will then come up with those different options in here, and you can save it so you can actually pre-populate all of your polls ready to go. So if you're thinking, I want to do an entry ticket and then an exit ticket at the end and maybe just a fun check-in, you can do that, and then you don't have to launch them until you're ready to do so. So again, that's just a really helpful way to be able to do that. And also, all of your poll responses are emailed back to you as your recording is and as your attendance is as well. So it can be really helpful to refer back to. And then that Q&A, so again, this can be a helpful way to sort of toggle questions on and off. Again, it can be a helpful way. You saw that we use that Q&A feature just to simply share the link to the slides. So if, for example, you needed them to access a resource, again, that Q&A feature can be helpful to be able to add something in as well. And then just to sort of very briefly touch on breakout rooms. So you may have noticed if you've gone into use Google Meet yourselves, that you do have that ability to set up breakout rooms now. So when you tap on to the shapes piece, then it then comes up with breakout rooms. And then as the meeting host, you will then be able to determine how many rooms. You can either choose to shuffle those rooms or keep the same room. So if you're putting people in a room and then bringing them back, you're able to do that. And then all you have to do is just simply click on create at that bottom there. And then once the actual breakout rooms are created, you can still edit them. So you can move people if needed. And you can see that the host teacher, again, can end those breakout rooms when they need to. And then in terms of what that looks like for the children when they're in, they always have that ability to return to the main room. And one of the other things is that they have an ask for help button. And what this does, it will alert you as the teacher to go and help them. So if they've got a question or they're stuck, then you can always go in and sort of help them. And these are the messages that come up whilst you're actually within that breakout room. So it'll ask you to join, and then again, it'll say to return once that meeting's finished. And just always, just to mention, sorry, I'm just going to jump back a second here. Just to mention, obviously with breakout rooms and our safeguarding, that you do need to have 2 members of staff within each room. So if you were to separate them out, you'd still need to have 2 teachers within a sort of additional room, if you could think of it that way. So it's just something to be mindful of. But obviously, if you're working, say, for example, as a key stage and you wanted to do something where you had your teachers separate into, say, year 1 and year 2 to do some planning, then again, as teachers, that can be a really helpful way. But obviously, with our safeguarding, we do need to have 2 teachers within within each room. So if you have that functionality, then obviously that is an option. And again, just a reminder that obviously as a teacher or as the host of the session, you need to be the last person to leave. So the person that has host access can remove anyone. So if you're watching the clock thinking, okay, they still haven't left yet, I've asked them if they have got any questions, do feel free to sort of use that minus sign to sort of get them to leave, and just make sure that as the host, you're that last person. That recording will come through. Just be mindful, it can take up to 24 hours for it to come through. So it might not come through straight away. Sometimes it does. Other times it does take up to 24 hours for the recording to come through. So I'm going to pass back to Cheryl, who's going to go through some other tools that you can use with live lessons.
Thank you. So we briefly touched on kind of how to use Google Meet and Google Slides together, but also just to remind you of the fact that you can collaboratively work on a slide deck as well. And again, you could do that exactly the same way that you did before. You can share the link within the chat function, or again, you can just post within Google Classroom and get the children. Just make sure you could do it as all the children can edit the slide so that you're all working on that slide at the same time. So there is that option to do that within Google Meet. Another way, just again, another reminder is Jamboard as well, which we've talked about quite a lot already. So the children can collaborate. If you want the children to have their own Jamboards, so for example, if you're teaching a live lesson, but you want the task that you're going to set them to be a Jamboard, then do that within Google Classroom, and make sure you use that make a copy feature, so that every child gets a copy of the Jamboard that you've created for them. Really, really good way of children being able to work at home. Just a reminder for those of you who already know how to use Nearpod, again, just a reminder that you can conduct the live Nearpod lessons. So if you've made a Google Slides with Nearpod features, you can get the children to do the Nearpod in exactly the same way they do in the classroom. Again, you might need to split, the children will need to learn how to split their screen to be able to do that, because again, they'll want to see you, but also they'll want to be able to access their work as well. Another reminder is that there is a self-paced mode in Nearpod. So again, if you wanted to set a Nearpod task as the follow-up or for reading, you can set Nearpod up, put it in Classroom, and then they'll be able to follow up using the self-paced mode. And again, that sends you all of the results at the end, so you'll be able to see exactly what the children have been getting up to. You can also use Google Forms within Google Meet. So again, you can have live forms in the Google Meet chat. You can make quizzes. You can use it as a starting point when you're starting your new topics this week, see what they already know. So again, you can do that. And probably one that I'm going to use a lot, I think, over the next sort of couple of weeks is the use of Kahoot. Being able to conduct the Kahoot game through Google Meet. Obviously, the way to do that would be to share your screen with the code and all the questions on. You will need to teach the children how to split their screen, but like I said, it's just very simple. That double tap on that top bar, and then opening the app to answer the quiz. So they'll have the Google Meet on one side, the app on the other. And again, you could share your screen like I did a minute ago and show the children how to do that before you set the Kahoot up for the first time. I think during the last lockdown, I think if you're working with older children and they've got other devices, they can download the app again onto their phone and just do it from another device if they wanted to. But you do have the functionality of being able to do it on just their Chromebooks. And lots of other things that you can integrate, not just with Google Meet, but within your lessons as well. And just a reminder of our digital package. So things like Flipgrid, text help, all of those things that, you might just need a little bit of a reminder that they're out there and that we can use them at home. Doodle Maths and English is a really good place to sort of pinpoint parents in the direction of, again, it just allows children to be much more independent. I'm going to make sure I put Doodle Maths at the end of every maths lesson if they finished. Make sure they go to Doodle Maths, Times Table Rock Stars, etc. And just make sure you've got that from year 1 up. So please make sure that you're utilising that. Google logins are all the same, passwords are the same. And there's a link to the digital package within the PowerPoint that will be sent to you. Just to go over kind of a few expectations, and this is in terms of setting your expectations really clear with the children. So when you meet with them over the next, well, tomorrow or the next couple of days, it's about really making your expectations of what you expect from the use of Google Classroom or Seesaw or whatever you're using really, really clear to them. So there are some slides here. Again, these will be sent to you later, but I think it's just really important to lay down those rules like you would in September when you first meet the children. It's about, well, how do we use this responsibly, and what happens if I don't? So things like making sure that the children are very aware that the class stream is to be only used to discuss learning is a really good start. In this document, there's, I constantly say to my class things like, it's really important that the stream is kept clean because it's their way of communicating with you when you're not face to face. So it's important that I can get messages to them, but also if things aren't working at their end, so say, for example, a link doesn't work and they can't get it to work, I say to them, there should be one person that posts it that says there's a problem, and not I have 30 different, it's not working, it's not working, it's not working, it's not working. And I think that's, that expectation of using that stream properly and responsibly is really important. And again, the consequences of not using it is that they won't be able to communicate with me during when we're not face to face during live lessons. It could be that they won't be able to communicate with their friends. They can't help one another out. And obviously, don't forget that you do have that mute function within Google Classroom, so that if children are not using the stream appropriately, then they will be muted, and then they lose all that privilege. But that must come straight away when you speak to them. And I suppose the same expectation goes when you first meet them on Google Meet tomorrow as well. Things like making sure they're keeping their microphone on mute. And again, the consequence of the fact that if they don't mute themselves, they will be muted by the person that's in charge of the call. It might be that if they're not sensible during the meet, that afterwards you will call parents and you will speak to parents about appropriate behaviour. Again, like last lockdown, there were a few children that were like sort of doing silly dances and messing about in the background, and it needed a phone call home, and you needed to be able to have those conversations with parents that, you're trying to educate their children here, and, they need to be keeping an eye on what the kids are doing during that time as well. Making sure the chat function using in Meet they're using that appropriately. And again, you do have the ability to turn that off now, which makes things a bit easier. Making sure that they're on time and they don't just, they're not lying on their bed, and they've got an environment where they're going to work. And they shouldn't be like lying on their bed. There needs to be somewhere in the house where they're prepared for their learning. And then there are just lots of things about if things don't work, it's okay. And I say the same to you guys, really. Like, if things go wrong, there's nothing wrong with that, and we need to, we just take a breath and we carry on. We don't get ourselves sort of het up and worried about things. We just take a breath and try again. And I think, some things will work straight away, some things won't. And I think that's the biggest thing that could go wrong, really, isn't it? And it's just about taking that time. And then kind of my final part that I'm just going to quickly talk to you about is kind of when you're doing your live lessons with students, just making sure that you're really chunking them up. What we kind of don't want to see is you just talking at the children, as I've been doing for however long, like this. I don't want to be it's not a lecture, it's a learning environment. And it's about, you need to make sure you're chunking those tasks up really, really clearly and breaking them up with some of the things that we've just spoken about. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you one of the lessons that's been planned by the team in Worcester Park Hub for a live lesson. This is a maths lesson that will be happening this week. and kind of that first task being kind of a fluency task. And again, there doesn't always need to be a tech element to it. And I think we forget that they probably have got a scrap piece of paper and probably some sort of pen at home that they can use. So first part, they're just going to do this. They're to find a piece of paper and a pencil, and they've got to try and solve this problem. And again, at the end, they might unmute and talk through some of their sort of responses. You can tell them whether you think they're correct or not and why, and their reasoning and things like that. You then go into your kind of in focus task where you're getting them to post in the chat what they think. So you're not necessarily getting them to unmute. You're just getting them to post in the chat kind of what they think length is and what tools they'll use, just like they would if they were in the classroom. Maybe they'd be talking to their partner, but they're just talking to everybody. And again, you can just pick up misconceptions and things that are going on there. Then there's a chance for you kind of to talk through a little bit of teaching. So, today you're going to be looking at length, and you're giving them key information about what a meter is. Maybe show them something that you've got in the house that might be a meter long, something that's less than a meter. And then you can see on the right hand side here, I've now got another Jamboard, which I'm going to share with the children via Google Meet, where they're going to find something in their house that they think is more than 1 meter or less than 1 meter. And again, you might not even want to do it on the Jamboard. You might just want to get them to just go off and find something. And bring it back to the room and hold it up and show you. Like, it doesn't need to, again, you don't necessarily need that kind of evidence of it. But I think I just put that on because I just thought that might be quite nice. But again, there's a conversation starter then. They've gone off, they've done something, you've broken it up, and it isn't just them sitting there all the time. Then there's time for you to kind of go through that guided practice. Now, you'll notice that I've done it in Jamboard, and the reason I've done that is because, like I said earlier, I have that ability now to be like, okay, so I need to know what the word length means, and I can use that tool to kind of highlight things. And I've got the highlighter tools to underline key information and things like that. And I can actually physically write on it and show them as we go. And the children are kind of you're still getting that modelling aspect to it. Then you might do a little bit of kind of the I go part of the lesson where, you might be like, okay, well, if I know this, then I'm going to show you how I would do it, talk through the thought process. Again, it might be that you put on things like the Deans where they can just copy them. So I can press duplicate and I can drag them and I can manipulate them. And again, it's the same as having the actual physical in front of them, and they'd be able to actually make it up so that they understand it. And then once you've done that, it's then about then setting them off on that task, telling them, right, this is the expectation now. What you're going to do is you're going to go away. I want you to go away and have a go. And then I might say that I've got a group of children that actually I can send most of my children off, but I can leave Rachel, Izzy and Tasha in the room in the meet call with me, and we're going to go through it a little bit more because I don't think they're quite understanding it yet, or I think they won't be able to do this by themselves. So again, you get everybody else off your call, and then you've got those children there to support. And then when you meet with them later, you can see what they're doing. You've uploaded this to Classroom, for example, it's on Seesaw, and you're actually able to see what they've done. You can pick up on it the next day. And that's kind of the base of the lesson. But just notice that I'm not going to do a whole lesson where I'm just talking at them and then sending them off. I've actually chunked it into different parts where they're moving or they're doing something at different stages. I think that's the key to good kind of online teaching. Stephen, I'm just saying, if once children have completed their work, how do they submit it? I don't know if you're talking about Google Classroom or Seesaw there, but if it's Google Classroom, once you've set the assignment in Google Classroom, they just need to make sure that when they go to that View Assignment button, there's a button on the right-hand side that just says Turn In, and they just hand it in. And I think that's the same with Seesaw, Rachel. Just correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, it is just a tick to upload it.
But yeah, just make sure that their activity, I'm not going to put this lesson I've got up right now onto Classroom. I'm going to have my separate one that they're going to go off and do after.
Thanks, Cheryl. I'll take over. So we're just going to touch briefly on feedback and engagement. And as Graham mentioned sort of at the start, just the importance of continuing to keep up your school's sort of marking and feedback policies that you have. That hasn't changed. Yes, it will be a little bit different, and you won't probably do that for all of your activities in the same way, but there still needs to be that aspect of that feedback and that importance of sort of bringing that engagement back together. So one of the sort of key important aspects that you'll know that's so important when you're in the classroom is that aspect of sharing good work and actually using those times where you are as a class, and maybe they are your wellbeing or so your morning, afternoon check-ins that you're doing, that you actually use that opportunity to see a really great piece of work that someone in your class may have gone away and spend a lot of hard work doing. So maybe they've gone above and beyond what you set for them to do for their topic work or for a science task, or maybe they've been engaging with some of the other Leo Central team resources that have been provided, and actually just highlighting that within your Google Meet is still accessing that and sharing that feedback. I also wanted to mention, and this is overlooked so often, is the Google Classroom app on your Chromebooks. So often we access Google Classroom just simply via the Chrome browser. If you actually access it via the Classroom app, then you do get the ability for any piece of work, so whether that's a docs, slides, PDF, anything like that, you actually do have that ability to press onto the pencil tool, and you can go through and annotate. You can highlight over the top. You can see that I've added text in here. So again, if you're providing feedback, that can be a really helpful way to be able to just quickly mark it up. Equally, if you're doing that in Jamboard, you could do exactly the same and just use those pens as you go through. Again, just to mention, obviously within Google Classroom, that you do have that comment bank, and I highly recommend utilizing that to help save you all time. You know, there will be times where you will use similar comments across pieces of work, obviously beyond just well done or great piece of work. So try and think of giving them that question. So have you thought of, could you include, and you can set those up within your comment bank, and then that way you can actually use that as your sentence starter for each comment, and then expand on maybe something that they have done and added in if needed. Again, if there are any questions of things that we sort of have gone through that perhaps you sort of need more clarification, Cheryl, myself and Graham are always here if needed. Again, this does go through the comment bank as well, so there is a quick video in here that does show you if you need to watch it, you can actually come back and do that. So I'm going to jump on to our next one, which is Mmote. Again, if you're trying to save time, and any early years and Key Stage 1 teachers on here that are using Seesaw will sure agree with me that actually giving verbal feedback is so much faster than having just to simply type out all of those comments all the time. So for Google Classroom, you can use Mmote. This is clicked and linked, and also I've hidden the slides. But if you open the slides up, you will see that there are instructions on actually how to get started in using it. So feel free to obviously go through that. I've also included these quick tips for providing feedback within Seesaw as well. So any early years and year 1 teachers, you can access these again. This whole Seesaw handout is linked as well, so you'll be able to go in and access that if needed. We are getting to the end. So at the moment, I'm going to go into tips. Now, I just want to give a big caveat that there are a lot of tips I'm going to share now. And these are just some ideas that may be helpful to refer back to, maybe not today, because we know you're also busy and probably exhausted. So you may like to come back to these at another point, but obviously you'll have these slides to refer back to whenever you need to. So as I mentioned, using those closed captions can be a really helpful way to actually make your content more accessible. So again, you can do this directly within Google Slides as well. So at the bottom, you have this option both in Google Meet and in Slides. So if you're using Google Slides, you can turn on that closed captions, and that will actually appear for everyone in your class. You've also got your keyboard shortcuts. So when you're in a Google Meet, if you want to work more effectively, so I find it so annoying to hide the chat and show the chat constantly, and actually using that keyboard shortcut, Control-Alt-C, is a really helpful way to be able to quickly do that. Again, this may be a helpful slide to come back to and to take and use with your children in your class. They often forget how to upload or add additional work. So perhaps you've sent them a PDF or you've set them a Google form, and then all of a sudden they've decided to go away and create an Adobe Spark or something in Toontastic, or anything at all, and they want to upload it, or maybe they've even taken a photo of the work that they've done. These steps will actually show them how to do that, and I've also included a video as well. So again, feel free to share that so that they can go back to. I'm just going to jump over it because we all know it's not as great listening back to yourself on a video. Also, just one of the other common problems that can happen, and just to be mindful of, is that a lot of the children will have hit the option that when an app launches, that it's automatically going to open up in the app version. So for example, often we see that in Nearpod, or Slides is always opening in the Google Slides app rather than in Chrome, and it can be harder for them to access. Again, this is just a quick video that'll take you through how to change that to make it more accessible there. Again, I just wanted to sort of quickly mention this book. It is all about the hybrid teacher from Emma Pass. She is an educator. She's originally from the UK. She's currently working in a hybrid school in the States. And this is just one little snippet that I absolutely love to take into live lessons. And it's that idea around the importance of establishing that check-in and that community building aspect to your relationships with your children, giving them a chance to move. They may have just come from another live meet prior to your lesson. Have they had a chance to actually get up from their desk and move around? Go through those expectations. Again, you do need to remind them in the same way that, if you take children onto a trip somewhere, that they will actually need prompting to keep quiet and to maintain that excitement. And then think about your instruction and chunking that content up, and then that practice or application, and then that importance of the final sort of goodbye as well. Also, your Google Classroom organization tips. Again, you may decide to use emojis to just help to organize your Google Classroom, because it can very easily be overwhelmed with lots and lots of assignments. Again, this is the same for Seesaw as well. In Seesaw, you can archive the assignments, so it's a little bit easier. So in Google Classroom, you may like to utilize those emojis. And in the speaker notes, I have given you the little trick to be able to access those emojis as well. And as always, problems happen. And if you do get stuck, there's always help. So the help guide is linked here specifically for Google Meet. You've always got Google Search. It's most underutilized whenever we do get stuck. Or ask us. We are here to help you in any way that we can. So please don't be afraid to actually ask for that help. We aren't experts either, and we don't know everything. So it is important that you do ask as well. Hopefully we'll have the answers. And then just finally, to wrap up, more important than just all the tech and the how to do everything is the relationships and the connections that you have with your children in your class. You know them better than anyone else, and that is the most important part. So all of these are actually linked to a series of slides of activities, of different remote connector activities that you can use. Again, things like scavenger hunts, they all love these. Jamboard templates to get them to sort of share ideas. Again, some check-in and questions that you can use to be able to access them. On a scale are my favorite. That's what we started with today. You may also decide to use their body. So 2 hands, 1 hand, no hands, as you go through directly on a live meet as well. So I will stop there, but just before I do, I just wanted to show you how to actually access that linked content, because you may not have realized. So I'm just going to jump into the edit view of the slide. So you will see, for example, the Mmote slides. I have just skipped them, but if you right click on a slide, you've always got that option to unskip it there. And you can see here.
Oh, we can't see the slides. We've lost you.
Always the way. Sorry. Okay, so let me show you that again. Sorry. So that skip slide won't appear, but if you right click, you'll then see skip slide appear. Again, for these, if you just tap onto them, you'll see that that is hyperlinked at the bottom. And as I mentioned, with those remote connection activities, you'll see that there's a little padlock option in the top right. When you tap onto that, you can see open source. This will then open up the slide deck with all of those various different remote connectors. It's exactly the same for Cheryl's slide that she mentioned earlier about the Google Classroom expectations. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to stop presenting so that I can see all of you, and just check if there are any questions of anything that we've gone over, any problems that you've had, that you've hit today, that we may be able to help with. Please do use that chat.
Can I just say, before we sort of finish things as well, is that like we're not expecting you to just be able to go away and magically be able to do this tomorrow. Like, it's going to take time, and just do what you can. Try things, reflect on it, just like you do in the classroom. Like, don't feel like you have to be an expert straight away. And we're not expecting you to start breakout rooms like this week, but just, you know, take it slow, one thing at a time, and see how you get on. And like I said, we're here if you need us. Just drop us an email.
Graham, I just sorry, Cheryl. Yes, you can. So if you're on your mobile, you can still mark it up directly on the Jamboard and switch it between. So if you wanted to present it from your phone, you could do that. You'd just share the screen there. So Becky, I know that you mentioned in terms of how we set it up, Google Meet Bio Calendar. It wasn't something specifically that I've gone through. They are in the start of the slides. So I will share the presentation so that you can obviously go back to that section. And obviously, once this recording's finished, we can do that as well. And again, feel free to send me a message and we can follow up specifically.
Okay, I'm just going to come in there and just say a huge thank you to Rachel and Cheryl for that session. I have to be honest and say I thought I knew quite a lot about Google Classroom. There was quite a lot there that I also learned. So thank you for that. I will do like a follow-up email to this session with a recording of today, links to all of the documents we've referred to, just so that if you need them, they're there. Clearly, they're not going to be the sort of thing, you know, you need to read every second, but just if there are any quick questions, you might be useful to have those. I'm sure Rachel and Cheryl and myself will just stay on the call. So if there are questions afterwards, please just stay on and you're very welcome to kind of ask them then. But other than that, just to say thank you for everything. As we said at the start, I know it'll be an absolute success teaching the children. I happened to talk to one child today that was over the moon that he'd be able to see his teacher on Meet tomorrow. So thank you for everything. As I say, if there are any questions, please do just stay and ask. But if not, have a lovely evening and see you all soon.